Mahatma Gandhi University of Medical Sciences and Technology, Dr. Enos Swankar Singh, Chairperson cum Chancellor, Dr. Vikas Chandra Swankar, Vice Chancellor, Dr. Achal Gulati, Pro-Vice Chancellor, Dr. V.K. Kapoor, Principal of Mahatma Gandhi Medical College and Hospital, Dr. N.D. Soni, Senior faculty members, colleagues and students. I welcome you all to the 26th undergraduate combined round of Mahatma Gandhi Medical College and Hospital. Today, the topic of UGCR is cirrhosis. The chairpersons for today's session are Dr. V. A. Saraswat, Professor and Head, Department of Hepatology, Dr. Prabjot Kaur, Professor, Department of Anatomy, and Dr. Manju Raghav, Professor and Head, Department of Pathology, Mahatma Gandhi Medical College and Hospital. As we commence this session, I would like to invite Dr. Karan Kumar, Associate Professor, Department of Hepatology, to share his clinical expertise on cirrhosis.
Good morning all, senior faculty members, my dear colleagues and dear students. Cirrhosis is about the pathology, the functioning, the diagnostic part. You will be learning a lot about them in today's UGCR. Just give you a glimpse why this cirrhosis is important, why we are here all to understand about this cirrhosis. Cirrhosis, the disease was discovered in 1820, almost 200 years back, by a French scientist who discovered the stethoscope. Who was that? Any guesses? René Lignac. So, interesting fact about René Lignac, he was a musician also. He was fond of listening, so he developed his own flute, which later translated into stethoscope. Anyways, going back to the topic, he was very fond of relating the clinical discoveries with the autopsy finding. Whenever a patient with jaundice who were consuming alcohol died, he used to dig their graves, took out the corpse and do autopsies on them. But he found out that all the patients who were having jaundice before their death, when autopsies were done, their liver used to be nodular, having a yellow tanning nodules on them, scarred, shrunken liver. For that term, he coined a term cirrhosis on the basis of Greek word kirhos, which means scarring. So he described that term, that patient who had jaundice had somehow relation with the liver, their livers are scarred. This is how the term cirrhosis came into existence. And now after 200 years of that existence, the finding described, the gross finding described by Lignac still holds true. Coming to the importance of cirrhosis, in India there is no formal registry of diagnosis or recording of liver disease, but rough estimates say almost 15 to 20 lakhs patients are diagnosed with cirrhosis annually. 15 to 20 lakhs patients annually are diagnosed with cirrhosis. Many more are missed. This is the formal number with which is presents to us. An important aspect is liver is a sturdy organ. It has got maximum regenerating capacity. The time period between normal liver to turn into cirrhosis runs into decades, maybe 1 decade to 2 decades depending upon the etiology. Still, when there is a window of 2 decades between normal liver and development of cirrhosis, still 20 lakhs patients are diagnosed with this disease. This is why it is important as a future physician to understand its aspect, its clinical importance, and how to prevent them, how to diagnose them, and how to treat them. With that note, I would now like to commence with this UGCR. For this anatomy part, I will call the speaker Dr. Mahi Gupta.
Good morning, everyone. Esteemed dignitaries, respected faculty members, fellow seniors, and my fellow batchmates. I'm Mahi Gupta, and today I'll be presenting the topic Anatomy of Liver and Photosystemic Anastomosis. This presentation was prepared by Iana Chaudhary, Pihu Bansal, Rakshita, Yashwanati Chaudhary, and myself under the guidance of Dr. Pankaj Kumar Singh Sir, Professor and Head, Department of Anatomy, and under the moderatorship of Dr. Nahid Yasmin Ma'am, Professor, Department of Anatomy. These are the learning objectives that we'll be covering in today's presentation. Starting with the introduction. Liver is the largest gland of our body. It consists of both exocrine and endocrine parts and it plays various metabolic functions which are necessary for the homeostatic, nutritional, and immune responses of our body. It is located in the right hypochondrium, upper part of epigastrum, and it extends into the left hypochondrium up to the left lateral line. Now its external features. The wedge-shaped liver presents a diaphragmatic and a visceral surface. These surfaces meet anteriorly at a sharp inferior border. Conventionally, the diaphragmatic surface is further divided into a superior, anterior, right lateral, and a posterior surface. Therefore, the liver in total presents with 5 surfaces: anterior, superior, anterior, right lateral, posterior, and a visceral surface. The liver is divided into 2 lobes, anatomically and physiologically. Anatomically, it is divided into right and left lobe as follows: superiorly and anteriorly by a falciform ligament, and anteriorly and posteriorly and inferiorly by fissure for ligamentum venosum and for ligamentum teres. The right anatomical lobe is 6 times larger than the left, and it is further divided into a caudate and a quadrate lobe. The caudate lobe, also known as the Spiegel's lobe, is located on the posterior surface of the liver between the fissure for ligamentum venosum and the groove for IVC. While the quadrate lobe, it is located on the inferior surface of the liver between the fissure for ligamentum teres and the fossa for gallbladder. Physiologically, the liver is divided into right and left true lobes based on the intrahepatic distribution of the hepatic artery, portal vein, and the bile duct. An imaginary line called the Cantley's line passes through the liver, dividing it into these lobes. On the posterior inferior surface, it passes from the fossa of gallbladder till the groove of IVC, and on the anterior superior surface, it passes from the groove of IVC till the cystic node. Each of these true lobes has its own primary branch of hepatic artery, portal vein, and it is drained by its own hepatic duct. Moving on to the structural units of liver, these are the hepatic segments. This is based on Coonon's classification of liver. He divided the liver into right and left physiological lobes, and then the right physiological lobe was further divided into an anterior and a posterior part, while the left physiological lobe was divided into a medial and a lateral part. And then these parts were further divided into upper and lower segments, forming 8 segments of liver. These segments are surgically resectable segments, and the veins supplying these segments are intersegmental. That is, they supply more than one segment. Most of the liver is covered by the peritoneum. The areas which are not covered by the peritoneum include the bare area of liver, groove for IVC, fissure for ligamentum venosum, the porta hepatis, and the fossa for gallbladder. Let us discuss about the porta hepatis. It serves as an important point of entry into the liver for the hepatic artery and the portal vein, and as a point of exit for the hepatic duct. And these structures are arranged in porta hepatis from posterior to anteriorly as vein, artery, and duct. Liver is supported by 2 types of ligaments, false and true ligaments. False ligaments are folds of peritoneum. These include the falciform ligament, the coronary ligament, the right triangular ligament, the left triangular ligament, and the lesser omentum. In contrast to this, the true ligaments are remnants of the fetal structure. These include the ligamentum teres hepatis, which is a remnant of the obliterated left umbilical vein, and the ligamentum venosum, which is a remnant of the obliterated ductus venosum. Moving on to the blood supply of liver. Firstly, the liver has dual arterial supply. The hepatic artery, which supplies 20% of blood to the liver, and the portal vein, which supplies 80% of blood to the liver. Secondly, the venous drainage. Most of the venous blood from the liver is drained by 3 groups of hepatic veins: the right, left, and the middle hepatic vein. These hepatic veins, they drain directly into the inferior vena cava, as the hepatic veins do not have an extrahepatic course. These hepatic veins, they also serve as an important point of support for the liver, in addition to the intra-abdominal pressure. Till now, we have discussed the gross anatomy of liver. Moving to its histology. The liver is covered by a thin connective tissue known as the Glissen's capsule. It consists of classic hepatic lobules, which are hexagonal in shape. At the center of these lobules lies the central vein, and at the corners of these lobules lies the portal tract. The liver cells or hepatocytes are arranged in plates radiating outward from the central vein, and in the narrow gap between these plates lies the sinusoids. The blood enters the liver through the sinusoids. It moves towards the center and it is finally drained into the central vein. The flow of bile is centripetally opposite to the flow of blood in the sinusoids. The liver cells or the hepatocytes produce the bile, which is then moved to the bile canalicles, and then these bile canalicles finally drain into the bile ductules of the portal triad. The liver consists of three types of lobules: a classic hepatic lobule, portal lobule, and a liver acinus. We have already discussed about the classic hepatic lobule. Second is the portal lobule. It is triangular in shape. At the center of this lobule lies the portal triad, and at the three corners of this lobule lies the central vein. And lastly, the liver acinus. This is known as the structural and functional lobule of liver. It is diamond shaped. It consists of two axes: a short axis which joins the two nearest portal triads, and a long axis which joins the two nearest central veins. It is divided into three zones on the basis of gradient of supply. Zone 1, 2 and 3. The zone 1, it is nearest to the hepatic artery, and so it has good oxygen supply, and it also receives toxins from gut. The zone 2, it is an intermediate zone, and lastly the zone 3. This is nearest to the central vein. It has poor oxygen supply, so it is more prone to hypoxic injuries. Moving on to the second major topic of today's presentation, which is the portosystemic anastomosis. There are sites in the abdominal cavity where the portal vein anastomose with the systemic veins. These sites of anastomosis form important points of collateral circulation in case of portal obstruction. The important sites of anastomosis include firstly around the umbilicus. Here the portal vein anastomose with the superficial veins of the anterior abdominal wall through the paraumbilical vein. Secondly, the lower end of esophagus. Here the left gastric vein anastomose with the esophageal tributaries of the accessory hemizygous vein. Thirdly, around the anal canal, here the superior rectal vein, which is a tributary of the portal vein, anastomose with the middle and inferior rectal veins, which are tributaries of the internal iliac vein. Other sites of anastomosis include the bare area of liver and the extraperitoneal surface of the retroperitoneal organs. Moving to the applied aspect, liver cirrhosis. The hepatocytes may undergo necrosis caused by either injury or death. This is caused due to toxins, infections, alcohol, or poisoning. The dead hepatocytes are replaced by fibrous tissue by the proliferation of the perilobular connective tissue. This is clinically termed as liver cirrhosis. The patient may develop jaundice due to obstruction of bile flow, and if there is obstruction in the portal vein or one of its tributaries, it leads to an increase in the portal venous pressure, and that is termed as portal hypertension. Liver cirrhosis is one of the major causes of portal hypertension. The effects of portal hypertension include, firstly, around the umbilicus. In portal obstruction, the superficial veins of the anterior abdominal wall become distended and tortuous. This leads to a formation of a prominent tortuous wall of veins around the umbilicus, which is termed as caput medusae. Secondly, the lower end of esophagus. In portal obstruction, the anastomotic channels here become distended and tortuous. That leads to the formation of esophageal varices, which may rupture, and that leads to hematemesis, which is vomiting of blood. And thirdly, around the anal canal, in portal obstruction, the anastomotic channels here become distended and dilated, and that leads to the formation of hemorrhoids or piles. The other effects of portal hypertension include ascites and splenomegaly. These are the references used for the making of this presentation. Now I would like to invite the Department of Physiology to take over.
Greetings to the esteemed dignitaries, respected faculty members, seniors, and my fellow batchmates. I am Pulkit Daria of the MBBS Batch 2025, and I am here to present on the topic Functions of Liver on behalf of Department of Physiology. This presentation is prepared by my fellow teammates, Raunak Chahar, Hazel Lethalwal, Mohammad Salbag, Minal Kamal, and myself, under the moderatorship of Dr. Himanshu Gupta Sir, Department of Physiology, Assistant Professor, and under the guidance of Dr. Aparna Gargna, Professor and Head, Department of Physiology. Starting with the learning objectives, this presentation shall briefly cover various functions performed by liver and their applied physiology. The functions we are going to discuss are metabolic functions, storage functions, phagocytic and immune functions, excretory functions, detoxification, synthetic functions, and others. Starting with the metabolic functions, liver plays a crucial role in carbohydrate, protein, and lipid metabolism. It maintains glucose homeostasis by gluconeogenesis, which is conversion of lactate amino acids into glucose. Glycogenesis, which is conversion of glucose into glycogen for storage purposes. Glycogenolysis, which is breakdown of glycogen into glucose when required. It also maintains protein metabolism by deamination, which is removal of amino group from amino acids. Transamination, which is transfer of amino groups for synthesis of new amino acids. And urea formation, as the toxic ammonia produced during protein metabolism needs to be converted into urea. It participates in lipid metabolism by oxidation of fatty acids to produce energy, synthesis of cholesterol, ketogenesis during fasting, as the ketone bodies are used as alternate fuels, formation of triglycerides and lipoproteins. It is also the primary site of bilirubin metabolism. Biliverdin is reduced to bilirubin by enzyme biliverdin reductase. This bilirubin is unconjugated and is transported to liver by albumin proteins. It then dissociates with albumin and undergoes a three-step metabolism. First step is uptake. The bilirubin complex is transported into hepatocyte where it forms a complex with cytoplasmic protein ligandin. Conjugation. The hepatocytes conjugate bilirubin with glucouronic acid and excretion. The conjugated bilirubin is then excreted out from hepatocytes into the biliary canal. Moving towards the synthetic functions, liver is the primary site of synthesis of plasma proteins such as albumin, which maintains colloid osmotic pressure and prevents edema. Clotting factors, which are necessary for blood coagulation to prevent excessive bleeding. Immune proteins and transport proteins such as transferrin, which performs iron transport, and ceruloplasmin, which performs copper transport. Moving towards bile formation and secretion. Bile acids are synthesized from cholesterol in hepatocytes and are secreted into bile canaliculi as salts. Contents of bile include bile salts, phospholipids, bile pigments, and cholesterol. As we can see in the diagram, the contents of bile alongside various ions are transported from liver to the duodenum by the bile ducts. The functions of biles are emulsification of fats, absorption of fat-soluble vitamins, excretion of bilirubin and cholesterol. The daily secretion is approximately 600 to 1000 ml per day. Excretion of bile. Bilirubin, cholesterol, and toxins are excreted through bile. Most bile salts are reabsorbed in ileum by enterohepatic circulation, as we can see. From liver, they are carried into the gallbladder by bile ducts, and there they are transported into small intestine whenever required. From there, they are reabsorbed, which is the enterohepatic circulation, and small amount of bile salts are excreted in feces. Detoxification. Liver detoxifies drugs, alcohols, toxins. For example, ammonia. It converts ammonia into urea. In the last step of urea cycle, arginine is hydrolyzed into ornithine and urea. The mechanisms include oxidation, conjugation, and reduction. Liver is the site of storage of various ions such as iron and copper, and it is the site of storage of vitamins as well, vitamin A, D, E, K, and B12. It is also the site of storage for glycogen. Phagocytic and immune functions. Kupffer cell activity is the primary immune function of liver, as the Kupffer cells phagocytize damaged RBCs, bacteria, foreign materials, and cellular debris. The bacteria are also removed from portal blood by liver, and acute phase protein synthesis also happens here. Moving towards the endocrine functions, liver participates in endocrine regulation by conversion of thyroxine to triiodothyronine, vitamin D activation, hormone metabolism. It also performs hematological functions, as it is the site of synthesis of clotting factors. It performs the destruction of old RBCs. It is the site of hematopoiesis in fetus and performs blood reservoir functions as well. Applied physiology. Liver cirrhosis is chronic progressive liver disease and leads to loss of normal liver functions. This can be caused by viral hepatitis, chronic alcohol consumption, alongside others. The clinical features include jaundice, which happens due to the disturbance in bilirubin metabolism, ascites, which happens due to the disturbance in synthesis of albumin, pedal edema, which again happens due to the disturbance in synthesis of albumin, and fatigue and weakness, which happens as the toxins are not properly metabolized. To summarize, liver plays a crucial role in metabolism of carbohydrates, lipids, proteins, and bilirubin. Liver performs synthesis of plasma proteins and biles. It detoxifies drugs, alcohols, and toxins. It is the site of storage for copper, iron, glycogen, and vitamins. And the covered cells perform the immune functions of liver. These are the references. I would like to invite the Department of Pathology to continue.
Good morning, respected dignitaries, esteemed faculty, and my revered colleagues. Today, under the expert guidance of Dr. Manju Raghav Ma'am, Professor and Head, Department of Pathology, and the excellent moderatorship of Dr. Advita Mathur Ma'am, Assistant Professor, Department of Pathology, alongside Yuvika Yadav, Yashoda Bishnoi, Yamini Yadav, Manisha Goyal, I, Suhani Rajvanshi, am privileged to present on the topic Etiology and Pathogenesis of Liver Cirrhosis, a chronic and progressive disease that provides the final common pathway of a wide variety of liver injuries. It is imperative to delineate the objectives that govern our approach to this condition. Through this presentation, we endeavor to enumerate etiology of cirrhosis, discuss pathophysiology of cirrhosis due to various etiology and understand its pathogenesis, observe stages of fibrosis, and outline the morphological changes associated with cirrhosis. Cirrhosis does not rise in isolation. It is the culmination of various insults, both silent and severe. They may be broadly classified as chronic alcohol consumption, which is one of the leading causes globally. Chronic viral hepatitis, especially due to hepatitis B or hepatitis C virus. Biliary disorders such as biliary obstruction and chronic biliary cholangitis. Inherited metabolic derangements such as hemochromatosis due to iron overload or Wilson's disease due to copper accumulation. Autoimmune hepatitis. Metabolic dysfunction associated steatotic liver disease, which is emerging as one of the leading causes due to increasing number of lifestyle disorders, drugs and toxins such as methotrexate and aflatoxins, cardiac cirrhosis due to chronic right-sided heart failure, and idiopathic or cryptogenic causes. Chronic excessive alcohol intake is one of the leading causes of liver cirrhosis globally. It is due to prolonged repeated exposure over multiple years. Ethanol is mainly rapidly absorbed by the small intestine and to a lesser extent by the stomach. There are three main enzyme systems involved, which includes alcohol dehydrogenase in the cytosol, microsomal ethanol oxidizing system or MEOS, which mainly includes CYP2E1 inducible system, which becomes more active by chronic alcohol intake, and catalase in the peroxisomes, which plays a minor role. They all contribute to the conversion of ethanol into the highly reactive and toxic acetaldehyde, which is further converted into acetate by another enzyme called aldehyde dehydrogenase. The four major pathological processes that are involved are steatosis or fatty liver, which is the accumulation of triglycerides inside the hepatocytes, impaired protein handling, in which processing and export of protein by the liver is hampered, direct toxic effect of acetaldehyde, which interferes with enzyme activity and cellular functional distortion, and oxidative stress generated by the induction of CYP2E1 system, which causes oxidative injury inside the hepatocytes. All of these contribute to persistent hepatocyte damage, which later converts into cirrhosis. Infection with hepatitis B or hepatitis C virus induces cirrhosis by immune-mediated hepatocyte injury. The virus themselves are not always directly cytotoxic, but the host's immune response against the infected hepatocytes causes a major source of damage. Continuous inflammation results in hepatocyte necrosis, apoptosis, and scarring. Common histological features include portal inflammation, interface hepatitis, and mixed cirrhosis. Characteristic feature of HBV infection includes the ground glass appearance of hepatocytes. Ballooning degeneration may also be seen, reflecting the hepatocyte swelling and dysfunction. In biliary cirrhosis, the primary insult lies not within the hepatocytes but within the biliary system. Obstruction or autoimmune destruction of the bile ducts due to loss of tolerance to mitochondrial autoantigens causes cholestasis, meaning impaired bile flow. It culminates into the generation of chronic non-suppurated destructive cholangitis due to retained bile salts that are highly toxic to the hepatocytes, which is defined by lymphocytic infiltration and destruction of bile duct epithelium along with bile stasis. Persistent cholestatic injury and periportal scarring results in cirrhosis. Inherited metabolic derangements include hemochromatosis, where genetic defect in the HFP gene affects the increases iron absorption, which causes iron deposition inside the hepatocytes as seen in this image. And in Wilson's disease, the copper metabolism is affected due to defect in the ATP7B gene, which causes copper accumulation inside the hepatocytes, brain and cornea. Autoimmune hepatitis occurs due to the loss of tolerance to hepatic autoantigens. Autoreactive antibodies such as anti-nuclear antibodies and anti-smooth muscle antibodies, among others, produce chronic inflammation that further culminates into T-cell mediated hepatocyte injury, resulting in cirrhosis. Metabolic dysfunction associated steatohepatitis, previously known as non-alcoholic fatty liver disease, is emerging as a major global concern for liver cirrhosis. It is strongly associated with obesity, insulin resistance, diabetes mellitus, and metabolic syndromes. It initiates with fat accumulation in the liver and is followed by oxidative stress, metabolic dysfunction, release of cytokines, and hepatocyte injury, which results in cirrhosis. Cardiac cirrhosis is secondary to chronic right-sided heart failure, which may be due to valvular diseases such as constrictive pericarditis, pulmonary hypertension, tricuspid regurgitation, etc. Venous congestion increases hepatic venous pressure due to backwards transmission of pressure, which results in chronic passive congestion of the liver and sinusoidal dilation. Reduced oxygenation mainly affects the central lobular hepatocytes, which results in ischemic injury and necrosis. Reduced hypoxia and persistent injury culminates into central lobular necrosis. Histological features are central lobular necrosis, hemocyte-related macrophages, and hemorrhage, while gross observation can be seen as nutmeg liver. Pathogenesis of cirrhosis unfolds as a cascade of interconnected events. It is a tale of misguided repair along with chronic injury. It begins with hepatocyte injury due to various etiologies discussed earlier. These awakens the liver's immune sentinels, that are the Kupffer cells, which release a storm of cytokines such as tumor necrosis factor alpha, interleukin 1, and transforming growth factor beta. These summon and activate the hepatic stellate cells, once quiet custodians of vitamin A, into aggressive myofibroblast-like cells. They begin deposition of excess collagen and extracellular material, laying down scar upon scar until the liver is more fibrous than functional. Amidst fibrosis, the hepatocytes attempt regeneration as a maladaptive response, but the so-formed nodules are often disorganized, inefficient, and ultimately futile. Thus, the lobular architecture of the liver is lost, blood flow is obstructed, and it gives rise to portal hypertension, which ushers in complications such as ascites, varices, splenomegaly, and hepatic encephalopathy. End-stage liver failure may follow with an increased risk of hepatocellular carcinoma. The staging of fibrosis is done mainly by the Ishak system, which grades fibrosis along 7 stages, where stage 0 represents no fibrosis and stage 6 represents definite cirrhosis. This is based on the extent of portal expansion, nodular development, and septa formation. Special stains are extremely valuable for assessing fibrosis. Mason's trichium stains is used to highlight collagen fibers prominently in blue, which helps in the visualization of fibrous septa, while the reticulin stain is used for the demonstration of reticular framework of the liver, which helps in assessing the architectural distortion in regenerative nodules. Morphologically, cirrhosis may be classified into 3 types. In micronodular cirrhosis, there are small uniform nodules that are formed, which are typically less than 3 mm in diameter. They are usually consistent in size and are classically associated with alcoholic cirrhosis, hemochromatosis, and chronic biliary diseases. In contrast, macronodular cirrhosis presents with large irregular nodules that exceed the 3 mm diameter. They are classically associated with post-necrotic cirrhosis and viral hepatitis, where episodes of hepatocellular necrosis are uneven and sporadic. In long-standing liver disease, these distinctions often blur, where a mixed type of cirrhosis rises, which represents the natural progression of cirrhosis, wherein micronodular types gradually evolve into macronodular forms. Morphologically, a healthy liver appears uniform and homogeneous with no nodules, irregularity, or septa, while cirrhotic liver presents a striking deviation from normalcy. There is diffuse involvement of the entire liver, where the fibrous areas are presented with depressions, and elevations can be seen in the place of regenerative nodules. The liver may be enlarged in earlier stages or shrunken in advanced stages. This is a classic specimen. This is a classic specimen of of a cirrhotic liver in advanced stage presenting shrunken macronodular appearance. The core morphological triad of cirrhosis includes regenerative nodules consisting of proliferating hepatocytes, fibrous septa, that is the dense scar tissue formation connecting important vascular structures. The bridging fibrosis may be portal to portal, portal to central, or central to central, and vascular shunting, which are aberrant channels or shunts that reroute blood from bypassing vital sinusoids, giving rise to resistance to portal blood flow. Thus, cirrhosis is not just a structural distortion but a functional derangement. To encapsulate, cirrhosis is a complex and multifaceted hepatic disorder that arises as the culmination of sustained injury and disordered healing. It is defined by regenerative nodules, fibrous septa, and vascular shunting. It is based on various etiologies such as alcoholic steatosis, viral hepatitis, biliary disorders, cardiac disorders, and metabolic derangements. Its morphological types include micronodular, macronodular, and mixed types. Its significance lies not only in its pathological intricacy, but in its profound clinical implications, ranging from portal hypertension to life-threatening disorders such as liver failure and malignancy. I would now like to welcome Manas Raj Saini from the Biochemistry Department. Thank you.
Greetings to esteemed dignitary, respected faculty members, seniors, and my fellow batchmates. I am Manas Raj Saini and I am here to present on the topic Interpretation of Liver Function Tests. This presentation is prepared by V. Pratap Singh Gujar, Vyom Paliwal, Siddhika Jain, Soumya Khandelwal, and myself under the guidance of Dr. Sarika Kokan ma'am, Professor and Head Department of Biochemistry, and Dr. Bushra Fiza ma'am, Professor, Department of Biochemistry, and under the moderatorship of Dr. Sunita Singh ma'am, Professor, Department of Biochemistry. These are our learning objectives. Biochemical tests performed to diagnose the cirrhosis, normal range and interpretation of biochemical tests, abnormal findings in biochemical parameters in case of cirrhosis. These are the various liver function tests to be performed. Here are some liver function tests which are performed. First of all, bilirubin, which is used to diagnose jaundice. Next, AST or aspartate aminotransferase is a sensitive test for hepatocellular diseases. In cirrhosis, AST is more than ALT as it is an alcoholic disease. Next, we have ALT, alanine aminotransferase. This is Next, ALT, alanine aminotransferase, is a sensitive and more specific test for hepatocellular diseases. Next, we have ALP or alkaline phosphatase, which is used to diagnose cholestresses. Albumin is an indicator of chronicity and severity. Ammonia is an indicator of hepatic encephalopathy, and PT or prothrombin time is an early indicator of cirrhosis in case of chronic hepatitis. Bilirubin, which normally ranges between 0.2 to 1.3 mg per dl, it's a breakdown product of heme. Here there are two forms of bilirubin, unconjugated and conjugated. Unconjugated bilirubin is also known as indirect bilirubin, which is high in case of hemolysis, whereas conjugated bilirubin or direct bilirubin is high in cases of biliary obstructions and hepatocellular failure such as cirrhosis. ALT, alanine aminotransferase, and SGPT, serum glutamic pyruvic transaminase, is mainly found in liver cells. This is primarily used to diagnose liver diseases. This test is more specific than AST because ALT is highly concentrated in hepatocytes, whereas AST can also be found in heart, skeletal muscles, kidneys, and brains. ALT normally ranges between 13 to 69 units per liter. This facilitates amino acid metabolism and gluconeogenesis. Minor elevations of ALT are seen in cirrhosis and chronic hepatitis, whereas very high levels are seen in hepatocyte injury. Next, we have AST or aspartate aminotransferase, also known as SGOT, serum glutamic oxaloacetic transaminase. This is found in liver, heart, and muscles. This is also helpful in accessing liver injuries. This is less specific than ALT. Normally, AST ranges between 15 to 46 units per liter. This is helpful in catalyzing the reversible transfer of amino group between aspartate and glutamate. High serum levels of AST are observed in cases of hepatitis, whereas mild elevations are seen in cirrhosis. This is a sensitive test for hepatocellular diseases. If AST is more than ALT, this is caused by alcohol use in case of cirrhosis. Next, we have a ratio, which is known as D-Wright's ratio. It is a ratio of AST to ALT. The normal value of this ratio is 0.8. If it exceeds 2, the causes can be hepatitis with cirrhosis, alcoholic steatohepatitis, myocardial infarction, and liver metastasis. Next, we have ALP or alkaline phosphatase. This is a non-specific marker for liver diseases. This is present in the small intestine, proximal convoluted tubules of kidney, bones, livers, and placenta. This normally ranges between 13 to 126 units per liter. In adults, this is helpful in hydrolyzing the phosphate ester at an alkaline pH. As a marker of cholestasis, this is also associated with canalicular membranes of hepatocytes and helpful in bone mineralization. Elevated levels of ALP are seen in biliary obstructions or cholestasis. Next, we have GGT or gamma glutamyl transferase. This is a highly selective test for liver diseases, particularly if disease is caused by chronic alcohol use, because alcohol induces GGT. This is very sensitive for alcohol ingestion and cholestasis. Normally, GGT ranges between 15 to 73 units per liter. This is involved in glutathione metabolism, is a marker of cholestasis and alcoholic liver diseases. In cirrhosis, GGT is typically elevated along with alkaline phosphatase. There are cases in which only alkaline phosphatase is elevated rather than GGT. The causes can be bones and or placenta in pregnant females. Next, we have serum albumin, which normally ranges between 3.5 to 5 grams per deciliter. This is a major plasma protein responsible for oncotic pressures. Because albumin has a half-life of near about 20 days, decreased in level of albumins are indicator of chronic liver failure such as cirrhosis rather than any acute injury. Next, we have a ratio of albumin to globulin, which normally ranges between 1.2:1 to 2.5:1. In cirrhosis, as hepatocytes are replaced by fibrotic tissues, albumin levels falls and globulin levels increase due to systemic inflammations. Here we observe a reverse in AG ratio in which serum albumin decreases and globulin exceeds, which leads to fall in the ratio below 1. Next, we have serum ammonia, which normally ranges between 9 to 30 micromoles per liter. Ammonia is a product of amino acid catabolism, which is converted to urea by urea cycle in liver. Elevated levels of serum ammonia can be linked with hepatic encephalopathy. Next, we have prothrombin time PT and INR. Normally, prothrombin time is 11 to 13.5 seconds, and normally INR is 0.8 to 1.1. Prothrombin time and INR is helpful in measuring the extrinsic pathway of coagulation, as major clotting factors such as 2, 5, 7, 9, 10 are synthesized by liver. Since these factors have a short half-life, PT and INR is the best marker for acute liver failure. Here we conclude this by the biochemical tests which are performed to diagnose cirrhosis are bilirubin, serum ammonia, serum albumin, PT, INR, AST, ALT and ALP. In this, serum albumin and prothrombin time and INR are markers for synthetic function. As hepatocytes are replaced by fibrotic tissue, albumin is not secreted adequately, so there is a decrease in albumin, and due to short lifespan of clotting factors and inability of liver to synthesize clotting factor, there is an increase in PT and INR. Total bilirubin, its conjugation and excretion is also hampered here. Here both indirect and direct bilirubin are increased because the conjugation of unconjugated bilirubin is not properly happening in the hepatocytes. Next, we have AST and ALT, which are marker of hepatocellular injuries. In cirrhosis, there are mild to moderate elevations of ALT and AST, in which AST is slightly more than ALT. Next, we have ALP and GGT, which are markers for cholestasis. There are also mild to moderate elevations in ALT and GGT. These are the references. Now, I would like to call Department of Radiology to further proceed.
Good morning, respected dignitaries, esteemed faculty members, and my fellow colleague. My name is Radhika Singh, and I am here to present the topic imaging in liver cirrhosis. This presentation is prepared by my teammates Bhumika Chaudhary, Kiran Yadav, Piyush Tiwari, Rakshita Gadia, and myself, under the moderatorship of Dr. Neha Agarwal, Professor, Department of Radiology, under the guidance of Dr. Paresh Kumar Sukhani, Professor and Head, Department of Radiology. Role of imaging in cirrhosis is diagnosis, fibrosis assessment, portal hypertension evaluation, check for any complications, HCC surveillance, and interventional planning. Imaging modalities used in cirrhosis are X-ray, ultrasound, Doppler USG, fibroscan, CECT, MRI, or MR elastography. Liver biopsy is gold standard procedure for diagnosis. X-ray doesn't help in diagnosing liver cirrhosis but show indirect signs and complications of cirrhosis like hepatomegaly or small shrunken liver, splenomegaly, ascites which show ground glass appearance, which can be appreciated in this image. USG is the first line imaging modality for diagnosing and evaluating cirrhosis. USG is done to check for alteration in liver morphology, signs of portal hypertension, HCC surveillance. These images show alteration in liver morphology. In the first image, irregular liver surface, shrunken liver is seen, and also ascites can be appreciated. In the second image, inhomogeneous liver parenchyma with surface nodularity can be seen, and in the third image, enlarged caudate lobe is seen. These images show signs of portal hypertension. Like in the first image, collateral vessels within the abdominal walls are seen. In the second image, dilation of portal vein is seen. And in the third image, collateral veins and splenomegaly is seen. Color Doppler is used to check portal vein diameter, flow direction, flow velocity, and the complication of cirrhosis. In liver cirrhosis, portal vein diameter is increased, that is, portal vein become dilated, and flow direction becomes hepatofugal from hepatopetal, that is, away from the liver, and the flow velocity is reduced, and certain complications like portal hypertension, collateral veins, portal vein thrombosis can be seen. Liver elastography or fibroscan is a non-invasive medical device used to assess liver's health. It uses ultrasound technology to measure liver stiffness and fatty changes. Its benefits are non-invasive, painless, quick and accurate. It gives liver fibrosis staging, which is from F0 to F4, with F4 being definitive of liver cirrhosis with value of more than 12.5 kilopascals. CACT. Role of CT in cirrhosis is to evaluate advanced structural changes and complication and screening and staging for hepatocellular carcinoma. In both these images, nodular irregular liver, caudate lobe hypertrophy with right lobe atrophy, heterogeneous liver parenchyma, regenerative nodules, fibrotic bands, splenomegaly, ascites, dilated portal vein, portosystemic collaterals can be seen, which shows it is liver cirrhosis. MRI is a gold standard for non-invasive evaluation of cirrhotic liver. The role of MRI in cirrhosis is HCC detection and staging, fibrosis and tissue characterization, differentiation of malignancies from dysplastic tumors, portal hypertension assessment, treatment monitoring. In the image A, nodular liver surface, caudate lobe hypertrophy, splenomegaly, varices can be seen. In the image B, liver parenchyma with many hypovascular regenerative nodules, ascites, decreased right to left lobe volume ratio can be appreciated, which are suggestive of liver cirrhosis. MR elastography is an MRI-based technique that maps stiffness of tissues. It allows non-invasive assessment and staging of liver fibrosis and cirrhosis by measuring propagation of shear waves through the liver. MRE findings in liver cirrhosis are increased liver stiffness, diffuse pattern of stiffness, fibrotic bands, heterogeneous stiffness. This image describes how MRE scan look like. Complication of liver cirrhosis, which can be seen on imaging, are portal vein thrombosis, which show amputation sign, hepatic hydrothorax, which show amputations, meniscus sign, and ascites, which appear as free fluid in Morrison's pouch between liver and kidney. Moving on to the most important complication of cirrhosis, hepatocellular carcinoma, which can be detected by triple phase CT and MRI. In both, arterial phase hyperenhancement with portal venous washout is seen. This means the lesion enhances in arterial phase and become hypodense in portal phase compared to the surrounding liver. Its characteristic contrast enhancement pattern of HCC is due to predominant arterial blood supply of HCC with reduced portal venous supply. In the image B, the HCC is enhanced. HCC surveillance is done by LIRETS, Liver Imaging Reporting and Data System. It's a standardized reporting system used to interpret and report liver lesion in the patient at the risk of HCC. It is developed by American College of Radiology. LIRETS categorization and interpretation. US LIRETS is mainly used for screening, surveillance. US 1 negative, routine follow-up is advised. US 2 subthreshold, routine follow-up in 3 to 6 months is advised. US 3 positive, in which further characterization with contrast enhanced diagnostic imaging is advised. CT LIRETS and MRI LIRETS are used to diagnose and characterize liver lesion, in which LR5 is definitive of HCC. Interventional radiology, these are the minimally invasive image-guided techniques to diagnose and treat severe complication of liver cirrhosis and to provide alternative to traditional surgery for managing bleeding and fluid retention. Tips. Transjugular intrahepatic portosystemic shunt. In this, portosystemic shunt is created to decompress portal system in portal hypertension and control variceal bleeding in cirrhosis, variceal embolization. In this, endovascular occlusion is done of bleeding varices. Balloon occluded retrograde transvenous obliteration (BRTO) is done to treat bleeding varices caused by portal hypertension. Paracentesis, it is an image-guided drainage of ascitic fluid. These are the references used. Now I would like to call upon the Department of General Medicine.
Good morning, respected dignitaries, professors and fellow mates. Today, I, Nitisha Soni of Batch 22, along with my colleagues, Kriti Rao, Ananya Nawal, Khushi Sharma, Madhusudan Yadav of Batch 22 would further like to expand our discussion on the topic cirrhosis, its clinical features, management and complication from the Department of General Medicine under the guidance of Dr. Punit Rijwani sir, Professor and Head, Department of General Medicine, and moderatorship of Dr. Shrikant Chaudhary, Sir, Associate Professor, Department of General Medicine. So these would be our learning objectives. Moving on, as we already have brief knowledge about cirrhosis and its etiology, so further expanding our discussion on clinical features, first symptoms, and what symptoms are something. Symptoms are something that a patient will present to us with. These are following, such as malaise, fatigue, lethargy, decreased appetite, pruritus, muscle cramps, contractures, loss of libido due to increased aromatization of estrogen, sleep disorders, gastrointestinal symptoms, skin discoloration indicating towards jaundice. Moving on to signs that what we will see in a patient. These are following, such as ascites. As you can see in the third picture, there is distension of the abdomen, both anterior-posteriorly and on transverse side, and dilatation of veins around the umbilicus, indicating caput medusae. And second are circulatory changes, such as pudendal nevi, as you can see in the first picture. That is because of dilatation, cutaneous dilatation of arterioles, and palmar erythema. As you can see in the second picture, there is reddish discoloration of thenar and hypothenar prominences, and it can also be observed in lower limbs as plantar erythema. Next are endocrine changes such as loss of libido, diminished body hair and hair loss, again due to increased aromatization of estrogen, and hemorrhagic tendencies such as bruises, purpura, epistaxis, and splenomegaly, developmental of portosystemic collateral vessels, flapping tremors are one of the important findings. Other features are pigmentation, clubbing, white nails, parotid enlargement, and Dupuytren's contracture, that is contracture of ring finger. Moving on to general physical examination. So when a patient arrives in a medical chamber, we do head-to-toe examination in such patients. So we can observe icterus, and then already been discussed, gynecomastia, edema, plantar erythema, clubbing, Dupuytren's contracture, etc. Moving on to abdominal examination. So if we do examination of any system, we divide it into 4 parts. First is inspection. Then it is palpation, percussion, and auscultation. So in inspection, we will observe abdominal distension, caput medusae, dilated abdominal veins, jaundice, spider angioma, muscle wasting. And if palpate the liver, then we will observe that it is enlarged in the early staging of cirrhosis. Because as in the later staging, it shrunkens in size with firm and hard consistency, and nodular irregular surfaces and sharp edges. And if we palpate the liver, palpate the spleen, then we will observe splenomegaly. And if we percuss it, then we can observe fluid thrill, shifting dullness, reduced liver span, and dull flanks. And on auscultation, we will observe venous hump and hepatic fluid. Moving on to the diagnosis. So we have divided our investigation portion into 4 parts. First is screening and second are step 1, 2 and 3. Screening measures are done as history and physical examination, etc. And moving on to general laboratory testing. As you can see, we have done cholesterol triglyceride test in this just to rule out non-alcoholic fatty liver disease. And in step 2, that is specific laboratory testing, we have done autoantibody testing to rule out autoimmune causes of cirrhosis. And step 3 is molecular invasive studies. And in this, we have done ceruloplasmin copper 24-hour urine sampling just to rule out Wilson's disease, and liver biopsy, which is a gold standard for checking the severity of cirrhosis. Now, diagnostic criteria for cirrhosis. So, cirrhosis is broadly divided into 2 parts. First is compensated and the other is decompensated cirrhosis. So, we call cirrhosis as compensated if there is no ascites and variceal bleeding present. But both of these are present, then we call it decompensated. Along with it, at least one of the following should be present to call cirrhosis as decompensated. That is ascites, hepatic encephalopathy, hepatorenal syndrome, hepatopulmonary syndrome, child-Turgot class B and C that we will see, spontaneous bacterial peritonitis and variceal bleeding. Moving on to scoring system, these are the scales to determine prognosis and mortality in a patient of cirrhosis. So we have used 2 scales over here. First is child-Turgot Pugh scores, in which we use 5 parameters to measure the scores. That is encephalopathy, ascites, bilirubin, albumin and INR-PT. And in this, we have further divided into class A, B and C. Class A indicating compensated cirrhosis, class B indicating decompensated case of cirrhosis, and class C indicating end-stage liver failure. And second score, which we use our model for end-stage liver disease, that is MELD score. And as the score increases, it denotes increase in mortality risk in a patient. And MELD score works on 3 parameters, that is creatinine, bilirubin and INR. So it also ranges from 6 to 70 in a patient. Why is it important? Because if it becomes more than or equals to 17, then we need to offer orthoptic liver transplantation in such patients. So moving on to the management portion. We have divided the management into 3 interventions, first line, second line and third line. So first we will see if the findings of the patients are suggestive of cirrhosis or not. If yes, then we will look at the history as it plays a crucial role in the confirmation of diagnosis. Further, we will confirm our diagnosis using laboratory tests and ultrasonography, and then evaluate on the basis of child-Turgot Pugh and other scorings, and then plan our treatment accordingly. And if still after laboratory tests and ultrasonography our diagnosis is yet not confirmed, we will go for liver biopsy, which is gold standard, and then definitive treatment would be liver transplantation. Now, general management of cirrhosis. There is no management of cirrhosis. All we can do is treat the underlying cause of cirrhosis and prevent its progression into complication. And we will advise patient to avoid alcohol and hepatotoxic drugs, and offer vaccinations, nutritional support, surveillance for HCC, and definitive is liver transplantation. Now moving on to the complications and their management. So liver cirrhosis could lead to ascites, hepatic encephalopathy, hepatic cardiomyopathy, cirrhotic. It presents with nutmeg liver and hepatocellular carcinoma, portal hypertension, spontaneous bacterial peritonitis, hepatorenal syndrome, etc. Moving on to ascites. Moving on to ascites. Ascites is basically due to increased water retention. As you can see in the picture, the abdomen is completely distended, and if you focus on the umbilical region, there is dilatation of veins indicating acute medusa. So in such patients, we need to decrease the fluid as there is increase in it. So we will offer salt restriction and diuretic therapy such as spironolactone and furosemide in ratio 100 to 40 mg per day, and then monitor the patient, and if patient is not giving adequate result, then we can offer low volume paracentesis and then TIPS therapy and further liver transplantation as definitive treatment. Moving on to esophageal varices. Esophageal varices, as you can see in the first picture, it indicates esophageal varices, and the second one indicates esophageal variceal ligation. So in this, we further divide our the treatment portion to check whether the variceal bleeding is present or not. If there is no bleeding, then we will opt for variceal ligation and give beta blockers, that is nedonolone and propranolol. And if bleeding is present, then first we need to make patient hemodynamically stable, and then go for ligation of varices, and then go for antibiotic restrictive management, and so on. Along with that, if it is a case of refractory or recurrent bleed, then we will go for TIPS and liver transplantation as definite. Moving on to spontaneous bacterial peritonitis. In this, if a patient of cirrhosis along with ascites is present to us, then we will do diagnostic paracentesis to rule out SBP. And in that, if we see that polymorphonuclear neutrophils are more than or equal to 250 cells per mm cube, then we can say that it is suggestive of SBP. Then we will start the patient on empiric antibiotic therapy, that is third generation cephalosporins along with albumin, and send the sample for culture, and then go for definitive antibiotic treatment. Moving on to hepatic encephalopathy. Hepatic encephalopathy is due to increased ammonia toxification reaching to the brain. So all we need to do is reduce the ammonia in the body. So we will give therapy indicating and directing towards reducing ammonia. So our first line would be to reduce ammonia, that is give lactulose to flush out the excessive ammonia from the body, and then monitor and support the patient, and based on that we have divided into mild, moderate and severe categories. So all in 3 of the cases we give patient lactulose and rifaximin, but in severe cases we also consider neomycin and metronidazole, and in cases of refractory or recurrent hepatic encephalopathy we go for TIPS and liver transplantation. And then we go for, and the last one is hepatorenal syndrome. So hepatorenal syndrome. If a patient present to us with cirrhosis and acute kidney injury, then we can suspect hepatorenal syndrome in such patients. So first we will diagnose HRS first of all, and then we will diagnose and treat the underlying causes, and then go for volume expansion with albumin. And if patient does not give adequate results, then we can also add a vasoactive drug therapy along with it, that is terlipressin. And if patients show improvement, then we will continue the therapy. And if there is no response or there is recurrent case, we will go for definitive treatment, that is liver transplantation. These are the references used. Now I would like to call Department of Surgery.
These are the following objectives we are going to cover in this PPT. Indications for transplant, historical aspects, types of donor, surgical steps, post-transplant, its impact, then institute's current status, and finally limitations and future. Indications of liver transplant. Decompensated chronic liver disease are the most common indications, followed by acute liver failure, then metabolic liver disease like Wilson's disease and hemochromatosis, and in children biliary atresia is the most common reason. Contraindications involve absolute and relative. Absolute contraindications are severe cardiopulmonary disease like coronary artery disease or cardiomyopathies, and active uncontrolled extrahepatic sepsis and extrahepatic malignancies. Relative contraindications involve diffuse portal vein thrombosis, cholangiosarcoma, severe malnutrition, and advanced chronological age. Historical methods. These are the procedures which are not done to fix the underlying liver failure itself, but are instead deployed to manage life-threatening complications of end-stage liver disease, particularly portal hypertension, keeping the patient alive enough period for donor organ to become available. These involve endoscopic therapy, splenectomy, balloon tamponade, and TIPS. Endoscopic therapy can be further of 2 types: endoscopic variceal bending and endoscopic variceal sclerotherapy. In endoscopic variceal bending device is used for esophageal varices, and whereas in endoscopic variceal sclerotherapy, we use intravariceal and paravaricial injections of sclerosins like ethonamide, oleate, and sodium murobutane. Balloon tamponade. It is an effective technique for massive or refractory esophageal and gastric variceal bleeding, where in some cases it is not successful, then Sangistic and Blackmore tube or Minnesota tube can be used. Splenectomy. It is done due to splenic vein thrombosis, which can further cause segmental portal hypertension, which is also called as left-sided portal hypertension. Here liver is normal, so splenectomy alone will correct the condition. TIPS, also known as transmural intrahepatic portosystemic shunt, is a non-surgical interventional radiological method where a stent is placed in liver between hepatic venule and portal venule through a guide wire following dilation. The size of the stent must be around 10 mm minimum. Indications involve Child's rate A and B1, and contraindications involve Child's rate C, encephalopathy, tumors, pulmonary hypertension, and right-sided heart failure. Types of donor. These are 3 types of donor: diseased donor, living donor, and other types. Diseased donor is a person who is brain dead or circulatory dead, and the transplantation is carried out at the end stage of liver disease patient. It involves split liver transplantation, which is a technique in which one diseased donor liver is surgically divided into 2 functional grafts and transplanted into 2 different recipients, usually an adult and a child. Advantages involve entire liver is usually available, it avoids ethical concerns of liver donation, and is suitable for large adult recipients. And its disadvantages include severe shortage of organ, longer waiting period, and higher waiting list mortality, risk of prolonged cold ischemic time. Contraindications are absolute and relative. Absolute are active uncontrolled sepsis, certain malignancies, and severe liver damage, whereas relative contraindications are advanced donor age, fatty liver disease, and hemodynamic instability. Living donor transplantation. In this, a person voluntarily donates a part of their liver while being alive to a recipient suffering from end-stage liver disease. Because of the regenerative capacity of liver, both donor and recipient can grow back the normal size of the liver within weeks to months. Its advantages involve shorter waiting period, better graft quality, and especially beneficial in acute liver failure. Its disadvantages include risk of donor morbidity and rarely mortality also, requires extensive evaluation of donor. Ideal criteria for a living donor is age between 18 to 55 years and blood group compatibility, physically and mentally healthy, and voluntarily informed consent, along with adequate residual liver volume after donation. Types of living donor are right lobe donor, left lateral segment donor for pediatric population, and dual living donor, where 2 donors provide partial grafts for 1 recipient. Other types include extended criteria donors, dual graft, liver transplantation, auxiliary liver transplantation, and domino liver transplantation. Common surgical techniques employed are conventional technique and piggy bank technique. Phases of liver transplantation are 4: hepatectomy phase, anhepatic phase, deperfusion phase, and biliary reconstruction phase. Hepatectomy phase is characterized by removal of disease or native liver. Anhepatic phase is the time interval between liver removal and implantation of donor liver, whereas reperfusion phase is donor liver implantation and venous and portal anastomosis to restore the blood flow, whereas the biliary reconstruction phase is characterized by continuity of biliary system for duct-to-duct reconstruction performation. Steps of surgical transplantation are recipient hepatectomy, vascular control, followed by donor liver implantation, and then portal vein anastomosis, along with hepatic artery reconstruction and biliary reconstruction, and then hemostasis and closure, and after that post-operative care is done. These images here shows the robotic surgery done at our institute. This image here shows endocyanin green dye used to demarcate the liver lobes to be resected. This is a video of robotic surgery being carried out and use of Grasper and swab to stop the complication of bleeding during surgery of hepatectomy phase. Care and follow-up after liver transplantation involve liver transplant, ICU monitoring, followed by immunocompressive therapy through use of steroids like cyclosporin, tacrolimus, infection prevention, and then diet and lifestyle modification, followed by regular follow-up and investigations for early detection of complications to ensure long-term graft survival. Impacts involve improved survival in cases of liver cirrhosis, fulminant hepatic failure, hepatocellular carcinoma, and biliary atresia. Psychological and social benefits employ improved mental health and confidence level, and better quality of life by relief from ascites, jaundice, varicose bleeding, and hepatic encephalopathy. The current status of our institute involves CUSA technique, that is Cavitron ultrasonic surgical aspirator technique for liver transplant surgeries, and robotic surgical methods for hepatectomy. There have been more than 170 liver transplantation procedures being performed at our institute, and it is the first institute in the state to perform first cadaveric liver transplant, living donor liver transplant, dual lobe liver transplant, and pediatric liver transplant. We have completed total of 173 liver transplants, and this graph here demonstrates annual liver transplantation data. Limitations of liver transplant involve shortage of donor, high cost of treatment around 20 to 25 lakh per surgery, and limited long-term graft survival, limited availability of specialized centers. Some diseases may also reoccur after transplantation like hepatitis B and C. Future of liver transplantation involve robotic and minimally invasive surgery, xenotransplantation, stem cell therapy and liver regeneration, and machine perfusion technology. Thank you, and with this I would like to conclude.